my name is Goldie Gamari, MPP for Carleton here in Ottawa. It is in the most sincere spirit of reconciliation that we acknowledge that we are on the traditional, unceded Anishinaabe Algonquin territory. The people of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation have lived on this territory for millennia. Their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. It is with respect for ties to the past, present, and future that we recognize our relationships with Indigenous peoples who are the traditional stewards of the land and with all members of the community where we have the privilege of living. I want to welcome everyone here today, especially the Honourable Stephen Lecce, Ontario's newly appointed Minister of Energy and Electrification. I also want to acknowledge Heather Ferguson, Senior Vice President, Business Development and Corporate Affairs for Ontario Power Generation, Paul Norris, President, Ontario Waterpower Association, and I also want to thank Carleton University for hosting us. The last time Minister Lecce was in Ottawa, he was the Minister of Education. He has had a major impact on education in the city. Since 2018, in my riding of Carleton alone, there have been 14 major projects announced for new schools or major expansions to existing schools. In most cases, he was the minister at Queen's Park who made these projects a reality in Carleton and in other ridings throughout Ottawa and Eastern Ontario. Ontario is becoming more dependent on clean energy as we prepare for economic and population growth in the future. The Ottawa region is growing at a massive rate as our population is expected to increase by more than 5 million people over the next decade. This is why our government is building 1.5 million new homes by 2031. However, we are going to need an unprecedented amount of power to support this growth. And our government has been clear since day one. We are keeping shovels in the ground while also helping to meet increasing demand from electrification and fueling the province's growth. I'm very excited to hear the important news our new Minister of Energy and Electrification has to share with us today that will help meet Ottawa's growing demand for electricity for decades to come. And with that, it's a pleasure for me to pass the podium to my friend and colleague, Minister Stephen Lecce. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you so much, Goldie, for the introduction and for the warm welcome. I want to thank Heather for being with us from OPG and Paul, of course, from the Ontario Waterpower Association for your collective leadership. We spent the day together making announcements for this community to strengthen the access to affordable and clean energy for families. I also want to recognize MPP Lisa MacLeod, the great MPP for Nepean, and I know she'd want to be with us today. This has been a very exciting time. Let me just first off say how pleased I am to be here in Ottawa just weeks after my appointment, demonstrating my commitment to the families of our national capital as Ontario's new Minister of Energy and Electrification. And with all the growth happening in this region, whether it be the new homes and the growing businesses in electrification of transportation and our industry, I know I will be back often because my mandate from our Premier is to scale up and to build upon our plan, an ambitious plan, to produce clean and affordable energy to fuel our growth here in Ottawa and across Ontario, now and well into the future. That plan includes more nuclear energy. The first small modular reactor in the G7 is being built as we speak at Darlington. The first large-scale nuclear build in a generation at Bruce Power, and the refurbishment of the Pickering Nuclear Generation Station 2. It includes the largest procurement of clean energy storage in the province and country's history, so that we can better integrate renewables and make our grid more efficient and clean. And massive expansions and upgrades to our transmission lines too, which includes a new line announced just by my predecessor, Minister Smith, in the Durham and Peterborough area that is going to be built specifically, that is being built specifically to allow us to flow more power to Ontario and to Eastern Ontario. But that's not to say Eastern Ontario doesn't play a massive role in electricity generation on its own. For as long as a century, hydroelectric power from the Ottawa to Madawaska rivers has helped to power our province. In fact, there are 8 stations today that are under refurbishment on these 2 rivers that can produce up to 1,617 megawatts of power, enough to power 1.6 million homes. That's power that's keeping the lights on and our businesses operating here in Ottawa. But these stations cannot operate indefinitely. If we want to keep producing clean electricity in this region, we need to invest in the future. And that's why today, standing with Goldie Gamari and on behalf of Lisa McLeod, our Premier, we are officially proud to announce that we're supporting the Ontario Power Generation as they invest $1 billion to extend the life of all 8 Eastern Ontario generating stations. And this refurbishment effectively is a major overhaul of all of the generators. It's going to have a huge impact. Over the next 20 years, OPG will refurbish these 45 units across the 8 stations, which will create 500 good-paying jobs and allow us to fuel our growth now into the future. Now, I had the pleasure of visiting one of these stations, the Chinook, earlier today with my parliamentary assistant, John Yakubuski, and those already working at that station. And let me tell you, none of this, our clean energy advantage and our affordable energy advantage, would be possible without them, our workers. And I want to express gratitude to them for the leadership they provide in our province and country. And I'm looking forward to working with our Labour partners as we continue to get shovels in the ground, to deliver the jobs, the economic growth that is consequential for our country and our province. And at the same time, the same promise goes to the people of Ontario, because we recognize with rising costs and inflation, the Premier and I and all of us in our Progressive Conservative team, we know how important it is we keep costs down. It's why we will never raise taxes on Ontario families. And we will never allow us to go back to the skyrocketing energy costs of the past. We will stand up for affordability and stand up against the federal Liberal carbon tax. And that includes standing up against carbon taxation in Ontario too. We're undertaking an ambitious plan, working with the energy sector to get shovels in the ground today. And I'm committed to ensuring Ontario families that receive affordable energy and that Ontario remains a clean energy leader. And with that message of investment of $1 billion for the people of Ottawa, I'm proud to turn it over to Heather now to speak more about the leadership work that OPG is undertaking in this community. Heather Ferguson, thanks so much.
Thank you, Minister Lecce, for your support of OPG and our hydro operations in this region and across Ontario. And thank you in particular for spending the morning with us at Chinook. I also want to thank MPP Gamari and the OWA's Paul Norris, our staff and community leaders for joining us here today in Ottawa. For many decades, OPG has generated clean, reliable, low-cost power from the 8 hydro stations in the Ottawa Valley. These stations have helped shape Ontario's past and present, and they will be vital in supporting our future. The more than 1,600 megawatts that Minister Lecce spoke of, produced by this fleet, helped drive the province's post-war boom 70 years ago. And in the years since, these facilities have helped support Ontario's growing population and industries. Now, as we face another period of increasing energy demand, our clean power workhorses in this region will be there to support Ontario's electrification and economic growth for many more decades. Through this $1 billion 20-year refurbishment program, we'll unlock efficiencies and more clean generating power, while also increasing economic benefits and upwards of 500 high-quality jobs across the region, as the Minister mentioned. And it's not just here in the Valley. From Niagara to the St. Lawrence River and everywhere in between, we're making similar investments to refurbish our hydro facilities to support our future here in Ontario. We're also continuing to explore opportunities for new hydro development in the province's north. And we're doing all of this because we know hydropower remains unmatched in its reliability, durability, and its flexibility. These assets can produce clean, low-cost power for generations, and in some cases for well over a century. Over a third of OPG's hydro fleet is over 100 years old, and half of it is over 70 years old. We're proud of this lasting legacy here in the Ottawa Valley, and now we look forward to writing the next chapter for these important stations through this refurbishment program. Thank you for joining us, and now I'd like to introduce Paul Norris, the President of the OWA, who will make some remarks.
Thanks so much, Heather, and thank you, MVP Gamari, for hosting us here today. Really appreciate it. And thank you all for the opportunity today, and welcome, Minister Lecce, to your new portfolio. I'm really looking forward to working with you and your team. I'm particularly pleased to be here in Eastern Ontario. This is really the heartland of hydropower. Communities across this region, from Ottawa to Renfrew, Eganville to Mississippi Mills, and Calabogie to Cornwall, have been home to water power facilities for decades. OPG's ongoing investment in these perpetual assets is an excellent example of our industry's contribution to sustaining Ontario's energy and economic advantage. In fact, an independent analysis of the economic impact of capital investments in our 220 existing water power facilities estimates that over a period of 5 years, more than $2.5 billion will be spent, with up to 90% of every dollar invested staying right here in Ontario. Paced investments like these create the confidence and the capacity across the entire industry supply chain that will be needed as we prepare to build the next generation of made-in-Ontario water power. So congratulations to OPG on today's announcement, and as importantly, congratulations to the communities, the companies, and the citizens of Ontario who will benefit. Thank you, and I'd like to turn it back over to MPP Kumari.
Thank you again to everyone who joined us here today. And as the Minister said, hydroelectric energy from the Ottawa and Madawaska rivers has not only helped to power our province, but also brought jobs to our city and region. With the announcement of today's $1 billion investment by the OPG, we are continuing to keep shovels in the ground. These 8 refurbished hydroelectric generating stations will continue to provide clean, affordable, and reliable energy to Ontarians. This plan will secure 1,617 megawatts of clean electricity generation, the equivalent to powering 1.6 million homes. This clean energy is needed as our government will be building 1.5 million new homes by 2031 to meet our growing population. With OPG refurbishing 45 units over the next 20 years, we are bringing 500 new, highly skilled and well-paying jobs to Eastern Ontario. I would like to thank the OPG, Minister Lecce, and our government for supporting the Ottawa region and for keeping shovels in the ground in Eastern Ontario. Thank you very much, and I'll now pass it to Minister Lecce for questions.
Who are in attendance and who have a question, if you can come to the microphone over here, introduce yourself, what outlet you're from, and you'll have an opportunity for one question and a supplemental just to give others a chance to speak.
Okay. Hi there.
Hi, Mr. Davis Legree, iPolitics. I hate to take us off topic right away, but I'm going to.
All right.
In a recent interview with Global News, Bonnie Crombie tried to distance herself from Justin Trudeau after the federal Liberals' recent loss in Toronto St. Paul's.
Right.
Your government and Premier Ford have been rather chummy, worked closely with the federal Liberals in recent years. Do you worry that relationship and the closeness of that relationship could hurt your party's chances of securing another mandate in 2026?
Look, I think Liberals provincially, federally, everywhere need to read the room when it comes to the fundamental issues that are hurting everyday families. And the carbon tax is at the core of our ministry and the core of the political dilemma for Liberals in Ontario too, because they're advocates for raising taxes at a time of an affordability crisis. So I'll tell you, the great threat to Ontario's prosperity is to revert back to the energy poverty policies that essentially are importing federal Liberal concepts to the province that would make Kathleen Wynne's hydro rates seem affordable and reasonable. And so our message to Bonnie Crombie, frankly, is that's not a path we can accept. It is reckless for the economy. It's punitive for the most vulnerable among us, pensioners, single families, parents, new Canadians. I mean, I just think at the end of the day, the mission of government should be to articulate policies that will not make it more difficult on families and workers. And that's our message. And so we'll work with any democratically elected government. We will disagree vigorously on issues like affordability and the carbon tax. And we'll collaborate where we can because, of course, we're going to stand up for the provincial interests. And there are many moments big infrastructure investments can only be done when municipal, provincial, and federal governments come together. So that we'll always lean into that collaboration when it's appropriate, but we'll also articulate rather vigorously and clearly our opposition to policies that hurt Ontario families, and the carbon tax is a prime example of one.
But what if the carbon tax isn't around by the time of the next provincial election? There's been a lot of speculation that Premier Ford might call a snap election. Do you think it would be advantageous to have an early election so your party can effectively run against a deeply unpopular prime minister and the carbon tax while it's still in place?
Look, I think our focus at this point is actually investing, delivering, and governing. That's not our priority, the campaign. Our priority is actually getting things done. It's why I'm here with $1 billion investment, like 16 days on the job, to renew the infrastructure that's going to power our homes and our growth and our industry and our families. So I'll let the other parties focus on the politics. We're going to focus on delivering affordable, clean energy, reliable energy for families in Ontario. I know our Premier is very much committed to that cause, so much so that he gave me a mandate to enhance generation. And this investment actually will allow us to better optimize our hydroelectric stations and produce more energy, more clean energy to power growth. That's in addition to the nuclear refurbishments well underway at Pickering and Darlington, the SMR expansions, the small modular reactors at Darlington 2, and of course the largest nuclear refurbishment of its kind in the country at Bruce. So this is a government that's thinking long-term, focused on affordability and focused on making life easier for everyday families, and that's going to be our priority.
Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't give you the answer you wanted there, but good try.
Anybody else with a question? This concludes our press conference. If there are any other reporters who want to speak about anything else, let us know.
Okay, thank you. Okay.